One. Jason, how the heck are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Hanging in there. Hanging in there as best I can.
Oh yeah.
We should take a second to explain a couple of things here. Are you actually broadcasting from a helicopter right now with the city of New Orleans behind you?
I'm on the 24th floor of the Plaza Tower in New Orleans. Never mind the fact that New Orleans. Oh, now
What happened?
there we go. So yeah, never mind the fact that the city of New Orleans is behind me because it's the New Orleans move geography that you have to cross the bridge. Down.
Yeah.
I in New Orleans and cross the river at the same time.
So, what's the That's a nice picture. Did you just get
Hold
that
up
off
one
the?
second, Dan. Now I can't hear you.
Yeah,
I gotta put in the earbuds. Sorry.
Yeah. Can we? We got to sort out our audio issues right now. We weren't having issues until we started streaming, and now we're having issues all of a sudden.
Okay, how's that?
I hear you now. You can hear
So,
me. You can hear me, right?
uh,
You there?
we're on a major delay here.
Okay. All right, but you can hear me fine now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, why don't we start over? So, the picture in the background. You said you were broadcasting from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm broadcasting.
Yeah.
I've got like an echo.
What's the matter?
I'm hearing everything like 10 seconds after it happens.
I don't know why that would be happening right now if it wasn't happening before we started streaming.
Uh, oh, I know what's going on. Okay, it's fixed. I had YouTube open on the computer and I didn't realize.
I told
And
you
it
to
started.
mute it.
I didn't know I had it on there. I thought I had it shut off.
Oh man, Jesus Christ!
Okay, so now that everything's all screwed up, where are we at? I've lost track.
Why don't we start over for the third time?
Okay.
Jason, that's a beautiful background picture you have.
So I'm on the 24th floor of the Plaza Tower. Never mind the fact that you can see downtown New Orleans and the Plaza Tower is practically in view, but it's the New Orleans movie geography where you have to cross the GNO Bridge in order to get from downtown to the French Quarter. So I can be across the river for New Orleans and in New Orleans at the same time.
Which one's the Plaza Tower? Is that the one that's abandoned?
It's the abandoned one right by the train station on Howard Avenue.
So
It's across from the train station. Howard Avenue actually comes to a T intersection with Loyola, and the train station is at the end of Howard, and it's on the corner of Howard and Loyola. It's real close to the Superdome.
Oh, okay. Is it that really weird looking one that's got the weird top to it?
It's just
Or,
yeah, it's a tall, skinny building that it's on some kind of a floating foundation. I'm not really sure what that means. It's one of those engineering things, but as far as I know, the building's not anchored into the ground. I don't really know how that works, but it's one of the taller buildings in New Orleans.
I mean, if you had 3 hours, I could tell you all about the engineering of floating foundations, but
Oh, I'm sure you could.
I'll spare you all that. What's that ship in the background? Is there any significance to that?
I believe the picture was a public domain image off of. Now I don't remember where I got it. I think it came off of Wikipedia, and it's some kind of Navy ship.
Yeah, it looks like a Navy ship. Is that the
mean,
New
can you-
Orleans maybe, or
That I don't know.
they
It didn't.
named it for?
The description didn't have that kind of detail.
Okay. Yeah,
But
because it's obviously pretty new. So
Yeah, and the picture I think was from 2014.
Okay.
So it might have been brand new at that point.
How long have you lived in New Orleans?
45, 46 years.
So basically your whole
My
life.
entire life. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, like, where'd you grow up? Did you always lived within the city?
No, I've never lived within the city. Well, for a short time I did, but I live in the suburbs in Jefferson Parish in Terrytown, which is it's a suburb of New Orleans. It's an unincorporated area. The closest city is actually Gretna, and Terrytown touches New Orleans on the west bank.
Yeah. So for those who aren't quite familiar, the vast majority of the city limit of New Orleans is, it's is north of the Mississippi River, aka on the east bank of the river, because obviously the river does some really weird curves in there, and so what ends up happening is that the east bank is actually north of the west bank by compass, but the vast majority of the city limit of New Orleans is on the east bank of the river, and then there's this one little area of the city known as Algiers, which is on the west bank of the city, and so you're basically in that area, and you've called that area home for a long time.
Right. I'm in that. I'm on the west bank outside of New Orleans, though. I'm not in Algiers because what's Algiers is Orleans Parish or city of New Orleans, and we're outside of the city of New Orleans. So we're actually in Jefferson Parish.
Yeah.
Now I do own a house in Algiers Point, and I've never actually lived there. And I did live in an apartment in New Orleans for a couple of years when I was around 20 years old, but that's the extent of my actual living in New Orleans.
Yeah, because your family goes back a long time in New Orleans too. Like I think I remember the last time I was in town with you, we did a bit of a drive through of Algiers, and you were pointing out some landmarks that go back quite a while.
My mother's family actually arrived in Algiers Point in like 1840 something.
Wow.
So it goes back 5, 6, 7 generations in Algiers. And my dad's family has only been in New Orleans since like 1942, I think. And they actually lived on the East Bank in New Orleans. In Lakeview and then Gentilly Woods, which is, they're kind of suburban areas within the city limits.
Okay. So, you are also you're a pretty active YouTuber, and you're relatively new to the scene. Why don't you take a minute to kind of describe, for those of you who don't already know the channel, what you do, how you came up with the idea, how you got involved with YouTube. Kind of take us through some of that.
Well, basically, it started out, I had this idea, I guess it was from looking at Google Street View, and it might have even been before you could do before you could check back for earlier Street View images, because this was in early 2016 when I started. The idea was to document the streets of New Orleans so that in years to come, after things change, and things change pretty rapidly in New Orleans, an entire block of buildings can be demolished and replaced with something new. Of course, they'll do that without ever even repaving the street, but the idea was just to document what was on the streets, as you drove down the streets, and so people could look back at it in later years and see how things used to look. And I've actually had a couple of things come up where drastic changes have been made, and I've gone back and reshot those streets and even done before and after split screen views of what it looked like several years ago and what it looks like now. And I actually did a couple of those for you too, I believe.
Yes, you did.
The old Tappan Zee Bridge and the Mario Cuomo Bridge. But that was the original purpose for the channel, and then I kind of ran out of stuff in New Orleans. I did most of the main streets, and I did some in the neighborhoods. I did one really early on. That was the lower Ninth Ward, which was still pretty well destroyed after Hurricane Katrina. And so that was the most I really got into the neighborhood streets, the little residential streets. But when I ran out of stuff to do, that's when we started just documenting our road trips. And we started with some interstates and some state highways and U.S. highways, and it just kind of blew up from there. And now I think we've covered 12 or 13 states in our travels, and it's all on YouTube.
The evidence is on YouTube.
Yep, forever.
Yeah, because you've been... I like to think that before you guys came along, there was really some sort of a gap in coverage, because there weren't that many people who had done road videos of the Gulf South. Louisiana was pretty much a unexplored area as far as road videos are concerned, and road photography and the like. And you guys came along and really helped to fill in that gap in coverage.
Right.
I'm wondering if that played any role in you guys getting the idea to start the channel.
Well, yeah, there wasn't, we had been watching your videos. There was another channel that I think has gone inactive, and it was a friend of yours. He was trying to cover all of the interstates. What was his name?
You're thinking of
cross country roads?
Yeah.
Right. We watched his videos, and he had actually, I believe, passed through New Orleans and covered I-10. But that was really all there was. There wasn't anything like it anywhere. New Orleans and Mississippi were not covered. There wasn't much coverage in Texas. There still isn't much coverage in Texas. It's such a huge state, and we haven't done very much of it because it's so far away. But yeah, our initial focus was going to be Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. We never thought we'd make it all the way up to Virginia, which we did because something came up where we had to go to Virginia, so we documented the whole trip. That was when we clinched I-85. And that's one of the few roads that we've actually clinched on the channel that aren't just local roads.
Do you place any emphasis on the idea of clinching, or like where do you fall on that?
That is the ultimate goal with any road that we travel on. But it's when you're dealing with weekends, it's very difficult to clinch any highway. Especially like interstates. There's short interstates and, the 3-digit interstates off of I-10, obviously. But the longest one we've done was Louisiana Highway 1, which goes from the southeast corner of Louisiana all the way up to the northwest corner of Louisiana. As far as clinching an interstate or U.S. highways, it's only likely to happen if we have a reason to be going from the beginning to the end of the highway, just because of time limitations.
Yeah.
That's what kills us with not being able to get some details. And we always see stuff, though. We should have done this. We should have done that. We should have stopped at this and done some handheld video or whatever. A lot of times we don't have time because, we'll take a 3-day weekend and travel 1,000 miles on a 3-day weekend, and all we're doing is covering a road, and we'll do stuff when we get to where we're going, but then we got to turn around and come right back.
Yeah, because you're kind of tied because you have a business, and so you're kind of limited in the amount of time you can take off, and that of course limits where you can go to some extent. How did you get involved with the business that you own today? You have a printing company on the West Bank.
That was one of those things that I kind of just fell into. originally, and this is going back to 1991, I worked for a company that refilled toner cartridges. And it was one of the few that did that in the New Orleans area at the time because it was a relatively new industry. And I worked for that company on and off for about 6 years, and then he sold out to another company, and I went to work for them for about a year. I wasn't real happy there, so I quit, and I went to work for a bowling alley. And I worked for a bowling alley for about a year, and the original business partner that I had worked for Bell and Howell, and they service those microfilm printers. And so he knew how to service printers, and I knew how to refill the toner cartridges, and I knew how to do printer service. So we started up the business back in 1999. And we did really well until Hurricane Katrina hit. And one of our biggest clients up until Katrina was Tenet Health Systems. And anybody who followed the news of Katrina knows that Tenet Health Systems just completely left New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina because there was a big scandal about them moving elderly patients down into the basement of one of the hospitals where they all died. And so Tenet Health Systems just ceased to exist in New Orleans, and that was $20,000-$30,000 a month of our business that just went away.
Wow.
And meanwhile, I had all these printers, and I had access to a paper cutter, and there was a lot of contractors in town to rebuild, and they all needed forms and business cards and that kind of thing. And so I decided just to start running business cards in-house. And prior to Hurricane Katrina, I had a print shop that I had dealt with. If somebody wanted business cards, I'd order them from them and just outsource them. Well, they didn't reopen immediately after the hurricane, and they kind of helped me to get going, to get going in the printing business, because I didn't really know a whole lot about it. But I found out that the printing business was a lot less labor intensive and a lot more profitable than the toner cartridge business. And so I just stuck with it, and it just expanded from there. And the guy who helped me get started in the printing business actually uses me for a lot of his production now. I do a lot of wholesale work, so that worked out really well. We have a pretty good partnership there, and it's just that's 90% of the business now.
And the other 10% is printing business cards for me, right?
Yeah, that I do. Yeah,
I'll have to put in another order with you before too long.
Yeah, just let me know whenever you need them.
Yeah, no problem.
I think I actually did a video of producing your business cards. I think I put it on Facebook or something.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that must have been a couple of years ago now. But
that was right after, I think, the last time you were in New Orleans.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm pretty sure that's when it was.
Yeah.
Because you weren't here when it happened, but I think it was after you were here.
I probably placed my order when I was last with you.
You may have, because we did meet up at my shop that night for that interview that we did.
Yeah.
I don't remember whether that one was on my channel or your channel. I think that was on my channel, wasn't it?
What the hell did we do?
I don't remember. You interviewed me on your channel back early on.
Oh, maybe
at that
that's
Motel 6.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
In 2017 when we met up, it was put on my channel, right?
Right.
So
we must have put the other one on my channel.
Yeah, I think that's what we must have done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because you're actually the first person I'm interviewing for a second time.
Oh, really?
Because through this first full season of interviews, we have not had any repeats yet. So
right.
You're the first repeat.
Huh.
I'll send your prize in the mail.
I get a Roadway Whiz. Do I get a Roadway Whiz hat?
Sure, that can be arranged.
Actually, you know what? Have you set up coffee mugs on Spreadshirt?
I have to go back and look. I don't remember.
A
lot of the big stuff that I emphasized early on was the hats and the T-shirts and the hoodies.
Right.
But
I'm running low on coffee mugs, and I don't even have a 504 Road Trips coffee mug.
well,
Uh,
you better address that.
yeah, because the coffee mugs get broken in the sink on a regular basis for some reason. I don't know how it happens, but the handles break off or they crack or whatever.
Oh boy.
And I'm down to one good coffee mug, so I need some coffee mugs.
Well, you gotta have those.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was it like living? What was it like with Hurricane Katrina? Going through that.
Well, up until 2005, I had never evacuated for a hurricane. And when Katrina was coming, it was my parents lived in Picayune, Mississippi, which is right across the border, 60 miles from my front door to their front door. And so we packed up the cats and went to my parents' house. And we figured we'd stay there for the weekend, see what the hurricane did, and go back home. When we got to my parents' house, I got a call from a friend of mine who, he's not a meteorologist or anything like that, but he's a hobbyist with weather, and he studies the weather maps, and he makes pretty accurate predictions. And he said, "Get the hell out of there right now. That hurricane's gonna pass right there." And so we packed up all the animals and took my parents and headed east. And we sat in traffic and we wound up in Valdosta, Georgia. And sure enough, he was dead on correct. The eye of Hurricane Katrina, because Katrina actually came in east of New Orleans, it didn't actually hit New Orleans.
Right.
The eye of Hurricane Katrina passed right over my parents' house in Picayune. And we would have actually been fine there at the house. The house didn't have that much damage, but there was trees down all around. You couldn't even get in and out of the yard.
Wow.
We had to cut trees before we could even drive into the property. And there was no electricity there for about 2 weeks. So, we probably were better off holed up at a motel in Georgia. But that was pretty much the experience. And, I remember watching the news, just constantly watching the news, trying to catch a glimpse of something, that would let me know, because I had no contact with anybody here. There was only a couple of people I knew who had stayed behind. Everybody really did get out.
Yeah.
And so nobody could really tell me what condition the house here was in. And or my office or any of that. I didn't know whether I had an office to go back to. So I finally heard from a friend of mine who's a firefighter, and he passed through the neighborhood, and he came and checked on the house, and there was a couple of trees down. One went through the roof, but otherwise the house was intact. And finally, I think me and my dad took off by ourselves and went back to the house in Picayune and found that it was completely livable. And we got the power company out there to turn the power back on almost immediately. So we stayed out there for a while. And I didn't return to this house because it needed some roof work. It needed sheetrock work. There was some mold and stuff that had grown in the time in the time that the roof was leaking. And I didn't move back into this house until over a year later when I split up with my first wife. And so the whole experience was, because we left, it was just this uncertainty. We never really, we never really knew what had happened here until I finally was able to see some aerial images and make contact with somebody, and then we got a better idea of what kind of damage we were dealing with. Coming back into the city the first time was a surreal experience because everything was abandoned. As you drove in, you could just see the destruction everywhere. There was a smell. And if you've ever experienced a refrigerator that got turned off with food in it and sat for a couple of weeks. There's this smell of rotting food in a refrigerator. If you make the mistake of opening that refrigerator, it will fill the building that you're in, that smell. The entire city smelled like that. Just because of all the rotting food that was in all these homes and apartments and everywhere. There was entire grocery stores full of food that just rotted.
Wow.
Without refrigeration. And, that's something I'll never forget, that smell.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I can't, as a lifelong resident like you, to see that, it's gotta break your heart. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It's gotta be, you said it was surreal, but, there are certain things that I'm sure defy explanation and defy description.
Yeah, there's really no way to describe it, and I wish that I would have had the kind of, camera equipment that I've got now, which is an iPhone, but it's better than anything I had back then. I did some VHS video with one of those old camcorders, and the video's terrible. 640 by 480. It's got a lot of flicker to it. I'm gonna have to dig it up one day and put it on the channel, but
I think you have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find it.
Because that's some historic stuff there.
It is. The thing is at the time, I really didn't have any idea how to operate a camera. Not that I'm much better now, but the video sucks. But there is some video. We drove in through New Orleans East, and we actually came in through the CBD. I remember getting a shot of the Hyatt Regency with all the glass blown out on the riverside of that building.
Wow.
I wish I had more. I tried to do video with the little camcorder back then, but most of the time I was trying to drive, and it wasn't just like regular driving because you were constantly dodging piles of debris and down trees, and it was like that for months.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard to drive and hold a camera at the same time. And that was, way before the dash cam era when, you'd just have something mounted. If I would have had something like that, it would all be on YouTube because a lot of that stuff that nobody's ever seen and probably never will see.
Well, something that we never thought we would see is what's going on right now. And you've done some video footage of New Orleans during the COVID situation. New Orleans and Louisiana in general has been a hot spot around the country. Did doing those videos of the CBD and the French Quarter with the empty streets and the abandoned businesses bring back the memories of Katrina? Do you notice any parallels between the two?
Well, the fact that everything's abandoned, it does. And especially the drive through the French Quarter, a lot of stuff is boarded up because they didn't want looters to come in. Same thing we do with hurricanes. It was like Hurricane COVID's coming. They got the French Quarter was heavily boarded up. It looked like it didn't so much look like what happened with Katrina because there was a very little bit of flooding in that area for Katrina. That area didn't flood bad, but there was some water in the streets, so there was some mud that went along with it. It didn't look like a hurricane had come through. What it looked like was the days immediately before a hurricane, when everybody's taking the precautions to board up their places and everybody kind of just goes home and shelters in place, but the sun's still shining because the hurricane isn't quite there yet. That's what it reminded me of. It's like there's a hurricane coming, but you can't look at the Weather Channel and find out when it's going to get here. And it still probably looks like that to this day, even though things are starting to reopen in New Orleans now.
Yeah. It's an ominous sight.
It is.
I know that's what I was feeling when I was driving through Times Square in late March, and there's nobody on the sidewalk and there are no cars out. You have 7th Avenue to yourself, and you've got all the neon signs up, and they're all flashing all their fancy messages and everything, but it just feels so out of place because there's no people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that's probably never happened in Times Square before, other than what was that giant storm that hit? I guess it was New Jersey. Was it Sandy?
Well, we had Sandy in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even with that, the city wasn't shut down
Okay.
for more than a couple of days.
Right.
Obviously, the Barrier Islands, New Jersey, Long Island, down in southern Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island, they got hit really hard. The southern tip of Manhattan got a lot of flooding, but up in Midtown it wasn't so bad. So, you still had like all the taxi cabs out, and you still had people going to work and stuff like that. But here now, it's just you take all of that off the table, and it's a very different feel. Like even 9/11, when that happened, people still had to go to work.
Right.
And the subways didn't shut down. The taxi business didn't shut down. So yeah, like this is really an unprecedented deal that we're having here.
And I was actually watching. I did catch the live stream where you drove through I know you drove through Times Square more than once, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, for that daily stream that I've been doing when I was still working down in Queens, that I took some detours and took guys through Manhattan on a few different occasions, because for me that was brand new as well, seeing all the lack of life forms, if you will.
Right. Now I was watching the one where you drove right. Well, you can't really drive through Times Square, can you? Didn't they shut down the street?
Well, you can't drive Broadway anymore.
Okay.
But you can still pass straight through on 7th Avenue.
Okay.
So
I knew you'd come close to it. I remember seeing that and knowing exactly where you were.
Yeah.
Because there was a place where I'd stayed in a hotel a block from something Square, and I can't remember what it is. It might be Madison Square. Not Madison Square. Whatever it was, I recognized where you were, and you drove right up, right past Times Square, and that was. I know the last time I was in New York, which was in July of 2016, me and Carrie actually went through Times Square. We walked through Times Square, and it was probably the only place in Manhattan that we encountered a lot of people. It was strangely, there weren't a lot of people out on the streets. We went all over Manhattan, and it was July 3rd, July 4th. But when we went through Times Square, it was wall-to-wall people, and we had to squeeze our way through. And we got out of there as quick as we could because we just didn't want to be around that many people. There was just too many people there. And that was the most people I've ever seen in Times Square. I've walked through Times Square a few times, and I've driven through it. And I did actually drive through it on Broadway one time about 12, 13 years ago. When you could still drive through it. It might have been longer ago than that. But, empty Times Square is even more. I mean, there's times when Bourbon Street doesn't have people out on it, but usually it's because it's raining or something and the bars are closed. But, Times Square, that was definitely something that you'll never see.
And then the stuff that you've been showing us as well of the downtown area, and as we said before, the French Quarter, is just amazing to see that. And again, it's for an unprecedented reason. We've had to, New Orleans has had to leave town. The residents have had to leave town for storms and stuff like that, but they've always come back within a few days. But,
it's never gone.
This is 2 months and counting. Yeah,
I mean, the lockdown here, I think, started on March 13th.
That was the day when it started up here too. Yeah.
Right, and so the Central Business District was immediately abandoned because people quit going to work. We got all those office buildings down there, and people quit going into the office buildings. All those jobs, people started working from home, so there was nobody on the streets in the CBD. when they shut down all the bars and restaurants in the quarter, there was really no reason for anybody to go there unless you live there. And the people that live there are all staying home. So the quarter is just abandoned. And I have not been back there since then. I don't think I've been back there. It's probably not much different in the quarter now because the bars still aren't allowed to open. I believe restaurants were allowed to open yesterday at 25% capacity. Okay. Originally, the mayor of New Orleans had said no to that, but people in New Orleans are not real happy with the way she's handled some things. But New Orleans is the epicenter for this. I know y'all got it bad up in New York, but I think because of Mardi Gras, I think that's where a lot of it came from. We had a lot of people that come from all over the country, all over the world, came in for Mardi Gras, and I think the virus got passed around by a lot of people at Mardi Gras, and then they all went back home and started spreading it there.
Yeah.
New York has a lot of people coming in from all over the place, so there's a danger there too. But New York just has, 20 times as many people as the greater New Orleans area, New York City?
Just the city is 8.5 million. So
that's...
metro area is about 20 million. So it's about,
that's...
It's about 10 or 20 times the population of Metro New Orleans, yeah.
Right, exactly. So once it starts spreading up there, that's going to be your other epicenter.
Yeah.
And I think New York and New Orleans were the two major centers, and that's where everything's like the hub. That's where everything's it's going to get spread from there, and so many people go in and out.
Yeah.
Now everybody's left New Orleans that doesn't live here, so everybody in New Orleans is passing it back and forth between each other. But it's and I'm sure it's the same way in New York. Yeah, you just got a lot of people in close quarters.
Right, yeah, because I had the same thought as well with Mardi Gras and how that correlated directly to the spike that Louisiana got. Everybody flying in from all over the world and then passing it around and then flying back home, and then you're seeing spikes in all the places that they originated from, right? Because then they started passing it around once they got back home. Yeah. Of course, then New Orleans proper got a spike because of all the locals who were taking part. I think they actually said that the start of the spread, or the strain that came to New York first, originated in Europe, which makes sense because you have all the direct flights to London and cities all over Europe, right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy to just transfer it over, via airplane, and then because the thing has such a long incubation period of 2 weeks or longer, you're not going to know it until it's too late, right?
Right.
So, but how has your business fared under all of this?
I'm still doing some wholesale work. Of course, the other print shops are having the same problem I'm having. I locked the doors on March 13th and quit letting people in. So the walk-in business, people come in to make copies and send faxes, and they're spending $2 or $3. I decided that it would probably be best not to have just random people walking into the place. So I cut that out. Very few people have shown up at the door wanting to come in to do that kind of thing, or called wanting to do that kind of thing, because people are just staying home. I do a lot of work for nightclubs and restaurants and stuff like that. The restaurants have continued to operate because they're all doing takeout. In fact, they've kept me real busy.
Oh, wow.
There's businesses. I do a lot of work for contractors and plumbers and electricians and that kind of thing, and they're all still operating because that's stuff that still has to go. So they need their forms and invoices and business cards and that kind of thing. Sales are about 25% of what they normally are. I haven't taken a paycheck since March 13th. Fortunately, I had a little bit of money put away, and I've been able to pay my bills and everything, but I quit writing myself a paycheck just because, there's no money to do that. And I'm keeping as much money in the checking account at work as I can, because I'm going to need to pay bills.
Right.
My landlord over there did give me 1 month free rent. So, which I didn't ask for, I didn't expect, but he came in and he told me, he said, don't worry about paying rent this month. That was back in April, and so I didn't pay the rent. I went ahead and cut him a check in May. And I still got some money left. So, things are going to start going back to normal. It's not like I'm broke or anything, but, after we're 2.5 months, I guess, or we're 9 weeks. So, I'm my bank accounts are significantly short. And of course, car insurance, life insurance, that all came due right in the middle of all this. So that's thousands of extra dollars that are not in the normal monthly expenses. So yeah, I'm down a pretty good bit in my checking account, but I'm okay. I got my $1,200, which immediately went to insurance companies when I got it in, and I didn't go for unemployment or anything like that. Because I was working. Yeah,
because you've never shut down the business, right?
No, I never actually shut it down. Now, there is some SBA stuff that I might try to take advantage of. I got to talk to my bank about that. Yeah, I mean, I've been working generally 5 hours a day. I go in about 10. I come home about 3. And I've been digging up banana trees the rest of the time and working on videos. I've been digging up banana trees since January, and I made a push this last month to get them done, and I've got them all out of there. I'm still digging up roots, but the banana trees are gone forever.
Oh, boy.
Yep.
Well, I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective on all of this shutdown stuff, because you are a small business owner. You're one of the few YouTubers who happens to have that distinction.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to hear what people like you have to deal with. We always hear about, now it's all over the news, like people filing for unemployment and the status of the small business community across the country, not just in any particular area. But, it's really important for people to hear what you're dealing with, and, how you're kind of making your way through this situation, because I think a lot of us in the community, if we're not working, we're definitely not owners of a business, and those of us who are working are essential personnel, so we have no choice anyway. But it's interesting to hear your perspective on all of that.
Yeah. Now, I might be a unique situation, because after nearly going bankrupt 15 years ago, I saw the value in getting debt paid off and having money put away for, emergencies. And that was the reason. 10 years ago, I'd be bankrupt right now. I'd be, filing for everything that I could possibly get, because I would be getting ready to file bankruptcy.
Wow.
Now, I had a few $1,000s put away, and for the business and for myself, and that's allowed me to keep going. If this went on for another few months, it may be a different story, but
I hope not.
I just hope that the business comes back, because there's a lot of things that I think are never going to be the same again. Like I said, I do a lot of work for club promoters. Every Friday they come in and get their flyers to, hand out on Bourbon Street or wherever to bring people into the clubs. That may not come back for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know when Bourbon Street is going to reopen. I have a friend that manages a couple of nightclubs on Bourbon Street, and she had actually ordered a bunch of promotional material for a big St. Patrick's Day thing that they were having, and everything got shut down before St. Patrick's Day. And about 3 weeks later, she called me. She said, I got a check from my boss. I'm going to bring it to you. And she came by the house and gave me the check. I wound up throwing all the, the promotional materials in the garbage, because St. Patrick's Day was long past, but she actually paid me for that. But, she may not have a job for a while longer.
Yeah.
There are some things that are going to change that, that are probably not going to be the same again for a long time, or maybe never.
Yeah,
There's really no telling.
Yeah, because I mean, when let's say it's going to be a while before the French Quarter and Bourbon Street opens up, but then how long is it going to take for Bourbon Street to get back to what it was before, as far as traffic volume coming in and out of the restaurants and the bars and stuff like that? Like they could reopen all of that stuff, but nobody's going to have the appetite to hang out in crowds and all that for quite a while.
There's some diehards that will be back in the bar the day they open.
I'll see you there.
But you ain't gonna see me there. No, I'm not. No. I don't go to bars anyway. I mean, that's something that I quit doing before I was even old enough to go into bars. But yeah, it's. I completely lost my train of thought.
No, but yeah, like I understand your point though. Like it's going to take a while. It's going to be a slow recovery. It's not going to be like the V curve that everybody talks about, where it's a quick shutdown and then a quick return to normal. This is going to be a very long, dragged out process. That's going to be a long-term thing.
Right.
Certainly in most parts of the country, that's going to be what it's like.
Yeah. The festivals. That's what I was getting ready to say. The mayor has canceled every festival, anything that might gather more than a couple dozen people through the end of the year. So Jazz Fest got canceled. That was supposed to happen in April. Yeah. That's never happened before. French Quarter Fest got canceled. Essence Fest got canceled. I'm sure Decadence will be canceled. That's I think in Labor Day weekend.
Saints games without fans.
That's another thing. Is how is the NFL even going to work this year? Are they really going to play in an empty stadium?
Well, NASCAR is racing in front of an empty track today.
That's
But then again, NASCAR and like those racing series, that's a
TV thing.
Yeah, like and the athletes can be distant from one another anyway because they're all in their own cars. So
exactly,
that's a more
they're
safe,
maintaining their 6 feet.
Yeah, but the NFL is, as you know, it's full on contact. Hockey, basketball, there's a lot to sort out as far as how these sports leagues are going to operate. Assuming that they even play this year. And I'd like to think that the NFL will find a way to make it happen, but I don't see how it's going to happen with fans in the stands.
They're either going to have to take a calculated risk to, be within 6 feet of each other on the field, which for what they're getting paid, they might be willing to do that.
Yeah.
But, I can see NASCAR. The vast majority of NASCAR fans are watching on television. But a lot of people go to football games, Yeah. I mean, that's, you might have 10,000 people going to NASCAR races over any given weekend. And you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people hitting the stadiums for the football games. You might be into the millions, going to football games every weekend.
Yeah, well, those games in the SEC, like in Baton Rouge or Tuscaloosa, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not just limited to NFL. You got NFL, you got college football, you got high school games. If you're in the small towns, that's a big thing. That's going to be really difficult for. I just don't see how that's going to work. Yeah. And I guess everybody will watch it on television, and that's fine. But are they going to have to pipe in crowd noise?
Yeah, you've heard some things, especially pertaining to how baseball would do it. I think that somebody was saying that they were thinking about crowd noise, at least for some of the baseball games. But, again, baseball is really tricky, too, because, you got a lot of players who are flat out opposed to playing until they can be guaranteed that they'll be safe and that their families will be safe. So, there's still a whole lot of stuff to be sorted out here, and I don't think there's an easy solution for any of these leagues. But hopefully we'll get to watch LSU try to defend their national championship in the fall. That would be nice to see. But
if anybody's going to find a way to do it, LSU will, you know.
The SEC,
but I guess all the other,
you know.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is all the other teams in the league have to be on board with it.
Right. I mean, if you had,
because
I think you have enough teams in the SEC where you could just have an all-in conference season.
Yeah.
Of some sort, and then play a conference championship, and then whatever happens from there happens on a national level. But
yeah,
I could definitely see the SEC doing something like that, where they say, you know what, we're going to have a season, and maybe we won't have fans in the stands at Death Valley or in Tuscaloosa, but we can at least protect the athletes, so we'll give it a shot. Yeah, I can see them doing that. We've talked a lot about the impacts of COVID on you personally, your business, but your channel hasn't really slowed down that much lately.
No, it's actually as far as me uploading or as far as views.
Well, let's start with the uploads. I mean, you were working through an I-65 series not long ago. Are you still doing?
I still am actually. Well, I'm done with it on my end, but I think the last I-65 video will post on the 18th, which is tomorrow, I think, or it may have posted yesterday. At the beginning of the lockdown, I took a week off of work where I didn't even go in, and I got like 3 or 4 weeks ahead on videos. And I've since fallen back to being like 3 or 4 videos ahead, but the final I-65 video in this part of the series goes live tomorrow at 5. So yeah, I got way ahead, you know, because I had time on my hands, and the uploads have continued. Views and subscriptions are up by about 50%. I guess because what's that?
That's about what it is for me too.
Yeah, people just, I guess, don't have anything to do, and since they can't travel, they're watching our videos because, you know, they can pretend like they're going somewhere. You know, they watch our videos and pretend like they're riding along.
Virtual road trips, right?
Yep.
You know, that's kind of
exactly.
That's kind of what we're stuck with these days.
Of course, revenue is, you know, cut by 75%.
Right.
So, you know, nobody's advertising on Google right now, so... You know, because otherwise, you know, it'd be great. You know, you're not making any money at work, so you know, get them big YouTube bucks.
Yeah.
Not that they're ever really big, but you know, it's nice to have something coming in.
So that I-65 series that you're in the midst of, that started in Mobile, right?
Right. It started at the southern
terminus. How far north
terminus.
did you make it?
Birmingham. Well, not quite Birmingham, because at the time that we did that, which was a year ago, 65 was closed through Birmingham because they were doing some major part of that I-20 project, I-55 project.
Yeah.
So they actually had 65 closed, so we took the loop. We had to turn to Birmingham anyway, so that was the furthest we were going to go on that trip, but we took the loop, and that was where I ended the coverage for the channel. That's actually one of the things that I'm interested in going further with. I've never been beyond Nashville on I-65, and I'd really like to, and it'll probably be one of those things where we run up there on a Friday night, stay in Birmingham, and then head north on Saturday up 65 and to see how far we can get before the lighting gets too bad on Saturday, and you know, that's where we'll continue the I-65 series.
Yeah, because if you manage to make it north of Nashville, there's some really cool stuff in northern Tennessee. There's some very scenic stuff. Kentucky's a little bland, but Louisville's got a lot of neat stuff in it as well. Just beware that the bridge on I-65, if you manage to make it up that far north, but the bridge on I-65 over the Ohio River is now a toll bridge.
So, oh, really?
Yeah. And you'll get your butt kicked in tolls if you don't have a tag or an Easy Pass. So,
well, I need to just look into getting an Easy Pass, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like you need it. There really aren't any toll roads down where you are.
No, not here, but I mean, for when we travel, since Easy Pass covers so many different things, it's something that I should have, and I'll just put $20 on it, you know, and forget about it, and
right,
or whatever, you know. I know if I went to New York, $20 probably wouldn't get me very far, but
It would get you over the Verrazano Bridge once.
right, yeah, yeah. No, I know the tolls are ridiculous. We drove over the George Washington in a commercial truck towing a trail one time, and it was like, I forget what it was, but it was double digits.
Yeah, it was obscene back then, so I can't imagine what it's like right now. But
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, like if you manage to make it north of Nashville, that'd be a pretty neat continuation of the series, for sure.
Well, I mean, from Birmingham to Nashville is only a couple of hours, and we don't have video north from Birmingham. So,
okay.
if we could get on the road early in the day from Birmingham, we might be able to get 10, 11 hours up the road before it starts getting dark.
Heck, you could make it to Indianapolis.
Exactly.
Yeah. But,
and I would need to have a 4-day weekend, or a 3-day weekend, Monday off, so that I could get back home. But because I ain't drive all that all in one shot. But I don't know. Memorial Day, I might do that. I don't know. I got to see what Carrie wants to do. But I want to go somewhere for Memorial Day because I want to get out of Louisiana. I haven't been out of Louisiana in 3 months.
You kind of feel like you've been stuck, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think we all kind of feel like we want to break out and go somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have an easier time of getting out to different places in the Gulf South and Mid South.
Right.
Because those states are much further ahead as far as reopening is concerned. Up here in the Northeast, it's kind of like, Memorial Day is out as far as being able to go anywhere. So now we're all kind of eyeing July 4th. But,
right.
But yeah, it would be nice to see you make some new inroads on some new coverage up that way. You've been uploading videos for what, 3.5 years?
We made 4 on January 6th.
So you're now.
So it's closer to 4.5.
So you're in your 5th year of doing videos. Is there a particular series that you look back on and appreciate the most or have the most level of fondness for as you look back, throughout your... I mean, you've only been doing it for a few years, but you've done quite a lot of different things. You have a very diverse portfolio, which is not something that a lot of people can say.
Right. No, you put me on the spot here. I don't. Of course, I'm drawing a blank right now.
I can tell you that the one series that I appreciate you doing more than anything else is the neighborhoods in New Orleans.
Right. You're not talking about just like out of town trips.
I just mean like videos that you've done. It doesn't even have to be local or long distance or anything. Like there has to be something that you've done in the last few years that you really admire yourself and really appreciate.
Well, actually, my favorite thing is the hotel reviews, which is probably the least popular videos that I do. But yeah, I mean that's something that I've been watching for years. Other people doing hotel reviews, and that's why I always wanted to do the hotel reviews. But that's actually my favorite thing because when you're traveling, you stay in hotels, and with our with the points program that we're on, we're fortunate enough to be able to stay in the nicer ones and not have to pay for them most of the time. So we try to get different ones every time and try to get the nicest room in the hotel, which we often can get upgraded into the best room in the hotel. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah, because it's different. Like I think when a lot of people look at road video channels, they expect to see a very specific kind of video. Like most people do like time lapse stuff. People do movies. People do the stuff that I do. You don't see a lot of people doing the stuff that you do, like the hotel reviews and the neighborhood tours. Again, are a big part of your history.
Right.
You've really carved out your own niche in the hobby and on YouTube. And I don't know that I get the feeling that when you were planning to do these things, you really didn't have that in mind. It was just something that you wanted to do, and you decided that it was worth putting on video.
Well, it came up as we ran out of stuff to do. Like I said, originally it was supposed to be the New Orleans streets. Well, I'm not going to drive down, some little residential street that's only 3 blocks long and call it a video. So I'll cover the neighborhood, and that was how. I'm trying to remember what the first neighborhood video was, and I don't remember whether it was the lower Ninth Ward, or whether I did something else first. But actually, I did the city of Gretna, which is not even in New Orleans, but I did that one first, and the Times-Picayune picked it up and linked the video on NOLA.com.
Oh, really?
And I got a lot of views from that. And I didn't even know it until I noticed it was getting a lot of views. And I did I forget exactly how I did it, but I figured out where the views were coming from, and it was actually coming from an article that they had posted.
That's neat. I don't think you had ever told me that.
I may not have known the last time I saw you, or just didn't come up, but the New Orleans neighborhoods, because the city is divided up, and of course, what the city planning commission calls neighborhoods is not really what anybody considers neighborhoods in most situations. They take, and they give street boundaries, and they say, well, we're going to call this neighborhood. Well, the people that live in that neighborhood may call it 3 different things depending on which side of it they live on, and different groups of people within those neighborhoods will consider the boundaries different, the name of the neighborhood different. So the neighborhoods thing was just a way I used the city planning commission's neighborhoods map just to divide up the city. So that I could say, I'm going to put this in one video. And that is something I plan on continuing at some point. I haven't been able to do it since, and that was one of the things I was going to do with the whole lockdown, was try and get out into the neighborhoods, except because the mayor of New Orleans was being so threatening with, talking about, people would be stopped on the street and questioned about where they were going. I decided I just wasn't going to go into New Orleans at all. And I don't think that ever really happened. I think, people made a big stink about it, and I think she backed off of that.
Yeah, because we didn't even do that in New York. So
no, I mean, Wisconsin was trying to do something. It wasn't quite that bad, and somebody sued, and the Supreme Court ruled that the state couldn't do it. This just came out in the last couple of days.
Well, that was their stay-home order. That
was it? I didn't really get the whole story, but
so their stay-home order was ruled unconstitutional, and now you have absolute bedlam across the state because nobody knows what the hell to do.
Right. Yeah. So that went from one extreme to the other.
Right. Yeah.
Now I have a cousin up in Colorado who they're not allowed to. I don't know if they're not allowed, but they've been told not to travel more than 10 miles from home. So if they got to go out and go to the doctor, go to the grocery store, the essential things that you have to do it within 10 miles of home.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going through checkpoints. Florida had checkpoints at their borders, and people coming from New York and Louisiana were being stopped and sent to a special tent, and they take your temperature and all this stuff. I know a couple of people that went to Destin and ran into that. There was YouTubers, R&K all day. They're urban explorers. They have a home in New York City somewhere, and they have a home in Florida, southern Florida. And they decided to go from where they had been holed up in New York for 2 months down to their home in Florida. And they actually videoed the entire process of getting stopped at the Florida border.
Really?
And when they, with the New York plates, they were sent into this big long tent that they had to drive into, and made them take their temperatures and wanted to know where they were going, how long they were going to be there. They wanted their full itinerary before they let them in.
Wow.
And I guess because they do own a home there, they they didn't have any problem. But I'm not sure how much longer that kind of thing is going to go on. Texas was stopping people at the border for a little while. I think that's over with now.
Yeah.
And that was mainly to keep people from New Orleans from coming in.
Yeah, I know that people in, like, state troopers in Delaware are pulling people over from out of state if they are not on the interstate. So,
oh, really?
I've heard that you can get through on 95 if you're going between, say, New Jersey and Maryland. But if you get off the interstate and DSP sees you, they'll pull you over. I don't know if they're still doing that because, you know, again, we're kind of in the process of starting to maybe reopen certain things. But the whole non-essential travel thing has been incredibly frowned upon ever since this started. So, and I know that Pennsylvania is another state that's really keeping an eye out for out-of-staters, you know, especially for people who don't have homes in the area. Yeah, it's a mess. It's really, you know.
I think it's going to take a while to get it all sorted out. Now that things are reopening, now we're going to see exactly how, whether there's going to be a second wave.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Yeah, that's what they're saying, that's going to crop up again in the fall. So even if we get control of it over the summer, it's just going to be a reprieve or whatever. But you know, they're talking about there being a second wave that's worse than the first one, which I don't know how that's possible. But
well,
yeah, there's a lot that we don't know at this point.
My theory is that it's not going to be over until everybody has it, and hopefully, you know, we'll have immunity to it once we have it. But unless they come out with some kind of vaccine and then vaccinate everybody, I don't see how it's going to be over until everybody has had it.
The idea of herd immunity, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You know,
'cause it always seems to come back to that, right?
Well, I mean, it seems like it has to. I mean, I'm not, you know, an epidemiologist, so I don't really know that much about it, but unless you're going to stay locked in your house forever, eventually you're going to be exposed to it. I also question, and of course now they have an antibody test, so you can go and get checked to see if you've had it. I think a lot of people have had it and didn't show any symptoms.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, so you don't even know you've had it. I mean, as much as you've been out and around, what are the odds that you haven't been exposed to it? As many times as I've been to Walmart, and oh my God, that's like, you know, the worst, the worst place you could possibly go.
Yeah.
You know, you and I are two people that have definitely been exposed to it at some point, whether we just miss getting it or our immune system is good enough to keep us from getting it, or we had it and never showed a single symptom.
Yeah. Yeah, like I am convinced that I had it.
Oh, really?
And yeah, like, and the antibody results in New York, I think they said that like 25% in New York City had it, which is like 2 million people. And of course I was working down there when this whole thing broke out, and people were getting sick around me. We didn't know what it was at the time, but, you know, people were kind of... It wasn't the flu, because they were testing negative for the flu, but doctors didn't know what the heck it was. So they were like, well, you probably have the flu, but it came back negative, so just go home and rest for a few days. You know,
right.
So nobody knew that it was COVID, right?
And how early on was that? Was that like January?
Like February.
February?
Yeah.
See, because I know several people around here that have the same exact story. You know, they had flu-like symptoms, they had the cough, they had the fever, you know, and they just, you know, got bed rest for a week or whatever, and it went away, and, you know, they went about their business. I know a whole family that went through that, and that was actually in mid-January that they had it.
Yeah.
And it's...
Yeah.
Of course, I've had this nagging cough for 2 months, and I think it's from allergies, you know, because I get this every year. The pine trees are dropping that pollen, and I've been working in the yard and stirring up all kind of stuff, and So I take Claritin. Claritin takes care of it. I have not run a fever. I haven't had any of the other supposed symptoms, because there's all kind of various symptoms you may or may not have. There's only a couple, which is the cough and the fever, which seems to be present in every case of it, but I've never run a fever. In fact, the thermometer I have reads 95 degrees, which is way below body temperature.
Yeah.
And I did have to go into a hospital, not for me, but when I got to the hospital, they had the people outside at a table, and they were taking everybody's temperature and giving you masks, and they took my temperature, and they were like, "Do you have it under your tongue?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they took my temperature twice, and sure enough, my body temperature is 95 degrees. That's just my normal body temperature.
Is that really?
Yeah. Well, it's like 95.6 or 95.8, but it's way below 98.6.
Right, yeah.
I thought the thermometer I had was broken, but I figured if it ever went above 97 or 98, then maybe I had a problem. But it's consistently 95 point something.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, we went off on a wild tangent there, but getting back to the New Orleans stuff, I know that you, when you were planning the neighborhood videos, you did a lot of research into, as you said, the planning maps and all that stuff to define not only the streets that are within a certain neighborhood, but also more or less the boundaries of each neighborhood as defined by the city.
Right.
And you did a lot of research on that in order to put these videos together. And I'm wondering if there was anything that you, as a lifelong resident of the city, was surprised by when you were looking through those maps. Like, is there anything that came up that you were like, wow, I had no idea that this was like this?
Not particularly, because I've been exploring the neighborhoods of New Orleans since I was 15. This is not something new. When I was a teenager and I started driving, one of the first things I did was I would go into New Orleans or around the West Bank, Jefferson Parish, whatever, and just drive around the residential neighborhoods. And I usually had a car full of people, and and we were just exploring New Orleans. And that's something that I've been doing for so long. It's very rare that I'll come across a street that I've never been down. There's a few, and there's a couple. I had an experience today that one of the things I've been doing is, and what I'm going to be doing probably for the next couple of months, is focusing on Louisiana highways. So I started with the ones that are closest to home, and that's going to be something that's going to be starting on the channel next week. But what I did today was the LA 45, which is Barataria Boulevard, and I think you covered this when you were down here, down into Lafitte.
Oh yeah, right. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I remember that.
Last weekend I drove LA 45, and it was kind of a gloomy day, and it was overcast, and I thought that would be good for video, but it was a little too gloomy. Excuse me. I drove LA 45, what I thought was beginning to end, but I did it without consulting a map. And when I got home, I looked at the map and discovered that I hadn't covered much more than half of it. So this morning I got up and I decided I'm going to go shoot it again. We had a nicer day, the sun, we had some sunshine, blue skies. So LA 45 at one time had a bridge that crossed, I guess it's Bayou Barataria. It's also the Intracoastal Canal down there.
Yeah.
And that bridge was demolished when I was a little kid, because I was actually in Lafitte when they blew up that bridge.
Really?
And I don't know why I remember this so vividly. I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and we were at Rosethorn Park. I was on a swing. My aunt was pushing me in the swing. My mom was there. And all of a sudden, there was this explosion, which was a mile away, but the explosion scared me to the point where I fell off of the swing. And, I remember, my mom and my aunt telling me that they were blowing up a bridge.
Wow.
And they built this high-rise bridge on what is now what was the Lafitte-La Rose Highway,
And that was the
that
bridge
connects.
that was the bridge that replaced it.
Right. The high-rise bridge replaced what I think was just a little. It was probably a swing bridge because that's all they had down there was swing bridges.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that LA 45 continued within the town of Jean Lafitte, and it continues for 5 or 6 miles down there, all the way to the very end.
Yeah, it winds around for quite a while down there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I had to go back and reshoot it, and it's an interrupted route that you get off of 45 and you get onto one of those 4-digit 32 something across the high rise, and you're back on 45 all the way to the very end. And there was actually an end LA 45 sign at the end of the road, which is something you don't see in Louisiana very often.
I think when I was down there and filmed that, it was the second time I was in town, and I think I took a picture of that same sign.
I'm sure you did, because it's something you don't see.
I seem to remember sharing it with you. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, it's good to know that sign is still there.
The sign is still there. Now, it may not be the same as it was when you were there because it's one of the new black and white Louisiana highway shields, but the end banner over it is green and white.
Okay. I'll go back and look.
It may have still been a green sign when you were there. But at some point they replaced the old green Louisiana shield with the black and white shield, but they didn't bother to replace the banner on it. Okay. And so you got a green end banner.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? That does sound familiar. Yeah.
It may have been like that. I mean, it's only been a couple of years.
Yeah. But that's a really fascinating area.
It is.
For those of you who aren't familiar, this is an area of Jefferson Parish. It's not that far from New Orleans, right? I mean, it's just a short drive from the expressway. It's
about, I guess, when you get to the end of the road, you're about 20 miles from the expressway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not that far away. It's 20 minutes away.
But, if you're taking the high-rise bridge heading back towards town, you can see the skyline on the horizon.
Oh, yeah. You're never that far.
Yeah.
As the crow flies, you're probably 10 miles.
Yeah.
But by road, it's not, it's further by road just because you kind of got to go out of the way to get to and from there.
Yeah. Now, the reason for the high-rise bridge, and this is one of the reasons why that part of Louisiana fascinates me, is that's an old remnant of an unbuilt highway plan.
Exactly.
The old high-rise bridge was just a part of what they called the Lafitte-LaRose Highway, which was supposed to originate near Gretna and take you across the swamps, basically parallel to the Intercoastal Canal, and you would link in with Highway 1 down along Bayou Lafourche, north of Grand Isle.
Right.
That was a plan. I gather it was proposed in the 60s or the 70s.
Probably, yeah.
But the 3134 highway and the high-rise bridge were the only elements of that were actually built. And it is interesting because when you look at it on a map, the 4-lane divided kind of dead ends at the other end of the bridge. And then, of course, there's that long gap that was never built. And then it's interesting that on the west side of LaRose, you have another 4-lane divided that starts up randomly on the other side of town and continues down through, the hell's the name of that?
3127, I believe. It goes to Golden Meadow.
3235 down to Golden Meadow. That's the name of the town.
3235. That's right. Yeah.
And then when you think about the Gateway to the Gulf Expressway, which is Highway 1 south of Golden Meadow, taking you down to Port Fourchon, you basically had a plan in place for a 4-lane divided highway between the Gulf and New Orleans.
Right.
And only a relatively small percentage of that highway was ever constructed.
Well, I was looking at this on the map, and where the Lafitte-LaRose Highway ends, right past that high-rise, and you can see it's a dead end. It's got a little stub that sticks out into the swamp.
Yeah.
It's 21 miles as the crow flies between there and LA 308 and LaRose, which is on the which is the closer highway on that side of the bayou. I'm sure it would extend beyond there to LA 1, and then and then continue on to 30. What is it, 3235?
I believe it's 3235. Yeah.
I used to know that because I used to go down there a lot. But that's the back highway that bypasses LA1 through Galliano, LaRose, Galliano, and Golden Meadow. So you can avoid that 25-mile-an-hour speed limit through Golden Meadow. Although I think it's 45 on the 4-lane.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that much of a stretch to extend that 4-way to the beginning of the Gateway to the Gulf Expressway. They could run it parallel to LA1 in the through the swamp, and it's only from Golden Meadow to the beginning of the Gateway to the Gulf, which is at Leeville. Is that Leeville?
Yeah, Leeville.
Yeah, it's only like 15 miles.
Yeah.
From Golden Meadow to Leeville.
I think I think that
you would have a 4-lane.
I think that is the long-term goal, is to extend it northward.
Oh yeah. I mean that, and when you get on the Gateway to the Gulf Expressway, you go through the toll plaza, you drive, and then there's a 90-degree turn left, which is one of the oddities of that whole bridge. There's several 90-degree turns.
Yeah.
When you get near, let's see, it ends at Port Fourchon, but there's a T intersection in the middle of this elevated expressway, which is just 2-lane roads.
Yeah.
Where you can take the T intersection that takes you to old LA1, because there's some oil field stuff out there, and I guess for some reason they felt like they needed to make it easier to get to it. But yeah, I mean, you make that 90-degree turn right after you get on it from the Leeville end, and that's where they would connect a 4-lane between there and Golden Meadow, and I think it's something that we will eventually see.
Yeah.
Although they've done nothing more for it, towards building it since they completed the current road.
Yeah. That's a whole area there along the Gulf, and then once you get outside of New Orleans proper and head south, whether you're heading down along either Bayou Barataria, or you're heading out towards what do you call it, Venice, right down at the end of the Mississippi there.
Right.
That's just some really amazing stuff out that way. And
It is.
That was some of my favorite stuff to do when I was out in Louisiana. It wasn't the highways or the cities. It was just seeing the rural stuff. The bayous are just a completely different world from anything that I've ever been used to.
And it's a much different culture too, even from where I live.
Yeah.
The people that live on the bayou, they're a whole different breed of people. I had friends that lived down in Galliano, which is just north of Golden Meadow, and I used to spend time down there. And they had a camp in Grand Isle, so we'd be back and forth between Galliano and Grand Isle, and they they have a culture that's more similar to the Cajun people, even though that's kind of out of Cajun country. Cajun country's further west, and that's my dad's people. They were Cajuns from Cajun country, but from the way that they speak to to the things that they do, most of them are involved in the excuse me. Most of them are involved in something having to do with fishing, or that kind of thing, because that's just a big industry down there. They're either involved with fishing or the oil field, because that's why you live down there, is because you're real close to the oil field, or you got the shrimp boats going right out of Bayou Lafourche.
Yeah.
So they have a very different culture than we have here in the city. We still have a lot of oil field stuff here, but in New Orleans, you're dealing more with tourism than oil field or the seafood industry.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go that far to get into a completely different type of culture.
Yeah, like New York to New Orleans is quite a leap, and then New Orleans to Bayou Barataria is another giant leap.
Right, and it's almost as big of a leap as it is.
Yeah.
From New York to New Orleans.
Yeah, that's true. Who inspires you as a YouTuber? like who have you kind of looked up to? Who gives you the the inspiration or whatever you want to call it?
That would probably be you. I mean, the thing is, well, I mean, you were one of the first road trip channels we started watching. That was, I mean, long before we created the channel, we were watching your videos.
That's really funny because, like, when I was planning my trip in 2017, I was looking for stuff on YouTube for, to see if other people had done videos, and the only channel that I found that had done like consistent material in your neck of the woods was you guys, and then I realized that you guys hadn't been around that long, at least at that time. Now you've put a few years on your car since then, but
yeah, I mean, we were only a year in at that point.
Yeah,
I want to say you came down. It was early 2017, right?
Yeah, it would have been winter.
Okay, yeah, so we had been around for a year at that point.
Okay.
You had been putting up videos for, God, how long have you been? 10 years, huh?
Yeah, Julius Caesar helped me produce the first video. So I've been around the block a few times. Yeah, it's gonna be 10 years in July.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, so you were 5 years in before we ever started doing videos. We were watching your videos. There was a few others, like Cross Country Roads was another one. Mm-hmm. What is Big Rig Travels was something that he live streams all the time, but we had sought out specific places that he had been just to see. And now I'm drawing a blank of who else does these things. I mean, I'm subscribed to probably a dozen road trip channels. There's Trans Canada Phil, who I think started after we did. There's a guy from Lincoln, Nebraska, that I'm drawing up. Cater Communications, Wanderlust. He's actually been doing this for a while.
Yeah. I have seen those channels pop up on your page, and then also on the other Facebook pages you have.
Yeah. I mean, I actually keep in touch with both of them outside of YouTube, but and they're on the various Road Geek pages on Facebook.
Yeah.
But that was something at AA Roads. I actually contributed to AA Roads as far back as 2005.
Oh, really? You go back?
Yeah, I took some pictures and emailed them into. It wasn't Alex. It was I can't remember. It was somebody else that was webmaster there who I had corresponded with, and then I started corresponding with Alex later. It had something to do with the Earhart Expressway. I forget exactly what, but and that was when the reply came back from Alex. So and he seems to be the only webmaster there now.
Yeah, I think he's the king of the court now over there. Yeah. But it's interesting that you go that far back. I know that you also draw a lot of your inspiration from urban explorers.
That's something that we never actually did. I wish I would have had a camera back in 2005, because me and some friends of mine did do a lot of urban exploration back in the days after Katrina. I had a friend that bought a house down in Chalmette, and it was gutted. It had flooded 6 feet deep, and he had to rebuild it from. It was just a frame. And so he had an entire neighborhood full of empty houses, and the front doors were all just wide open. So we walked through every house in the neighborhood. All the belongings of the people had been removed. Some of them were completely gutted. Some of them were gutted up to where the flood line was. But, it was interesting because it wasn't one of these... I think there's no zoning down there, so every house was completely different. And there were some really unique houses down there. one of which his mother wound up buying and still lives in to this day. There was a house that belonged to a football player that played for the Saints, and apparently he was a really tall guy because his doorways were all 7 feet. You know, the ceilings were 9 feet, and the doorways were all 7 feet, and he had to have doors custom made.
Wow.
I guess for 7-foot doors, because that's not any kind of a standard. Now maybe the doors were taller than 7 feet. Maybe a door is supposed to be 7 feet. I don't know, but the doors were taller than normal. You know.
I'd be interested to know who it was.
I don't know if we ever even knew who it was.
Definitely wasn't Drew Brees, because he's my height.
Oh no, this is going back.
Well, this was before Drew Brees even got there.
This house was built probably in the late '60s.
Oh, okay.
So this was somebody in the early history of the Saints.
Okay.
That built this house. You know, then there were some houses that were identical to my friend's house. That you could tell, you know, it was the same floor plan, but you kind of got an idea how the house was originally because there was modifications made to one but not the other. It was really interesting. And then there was one house that that his aunt lived in years back, and so we drive into this neighborhood and like, this was my aunt's house, let's go check it out. And so we go, and the front door is unlocked, and we walked in. It was still completely furnished.
Oh, really?
The couch had floated up onto the kitchen counter. Nobody had been in this house since the flood, and the floor was just goop. And I took a bunch of pictures in there.
Wow.
You know, but you know, there was nobody around to tell us not to go in. I mean, now I wouldn't do that because I'd be afraid of getting shot.
Well, yeah.
And that kind of thing will happen here.
Yeah.
So. You know, we had access to a couple of buildings that were, a friend of ours had a demolition contract on these 2 buildings on Chapatula Street, and we had the keys, so we went in and I had hundreds of pictures I took in there, and we put them all on a hard drive, and the hard drive crashed, and they're gone forever. So that was my stint with urban exploring, and that was as far as it ever really went.
You had access to a lot of homes, but you didn't have access to Jazzland.
I never attempted to have access to Jazzland.
You know, that's kind of the holy grail for me.
Yeah,
Jazzland.
That
was, for those of you who aren't familiar, that's an amusement park in New Orleans East. It was built under the name of Jazzland, and then it became
Six Flags.
It was part of the Six Flags umbrella, right? But I think most people in the area still refer to it as Jazzland.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've always called it, was Jazzland.
So when Katrina came through, they closed down the park, and the park never reopened, and they just basically left it as it was. And it's basically a time capsule back to the weekend before Katrina hit. And actually, you know, one of the freakiest pictures I took, or I remember seeing, was driving whichever one of those cross streets there were, where there was like a main entrance, and there was the sign that said like Six Flags or whatever, and they had a little thing with the letters on the board. You know, you can write your own little messages and stuff like that, and the sign to that day, like in 2017 or 18, still read "Closed for season."
Closed for storm.
Closed for storm. That's what it was. Yeah.
So
that was really eerie, seeing that. It's almost like that area is frozen in time when you look at drone videos of it and pictures that people have been able to sneak out of there over the years. It's really an amazing place.
Well, everybody watching this needs to check out closedforstorm.com. This has come up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. There's a filmmaker in Canada, somewhere up near Toronto, Jake Williams, Bright Sun Films, who came down to New Orleans. I guess this was in the fall of 2018, and got permits to go into Jazzland, and he actually filmed a documentary, and he's trying to get it get the film premiered at some film festivals, but all film film festivals have been canceled.
Right.
He's trying to do a premiere in New Orleans, but from the trailer that I've seen, it looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting movie. And this guy is a kid. I mean, he's God, I don't think he's 25 years old. He's young.
Wow.
He's even younger than you. But
Not pretty damn young, yeah.
Yeah, he's been, trying to get into the filmmaking, since he was probably 15. He's been on YouTube for probably 10 years now. And he does some really good production, and so I'm hoping to be able to get to go to his premiere because I really want to see this film that he's made.
And this is closedforstorm.com?
Yeah, he's got closedforstorm.com set up, and it's got the trailer.
I'm gonna put that in the chat here.
Yeah.
So that people can find it if they want. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm gonna check out when I'm done with you. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, he actually did interviews with people that work there too, and he really did a lot of work on this.
Okay.
So it's not just going to be, and he's got his Bright Sun Films channel. He does Urbex type stuff, and he does. He's got a bunch of different series he does, but he put a lot of time and effort into this one. It's spent, from what I understand, like $50,000 of his own money to put this together.
Wow.
So this wasn't just a YouTube production. This is something that he's aiming to be a lot bigger.
Well, he's put a lot of effort into what he's doing, and you've put a lot of effort into what you're doing. I want to spend a minute talking about your presentation style, because you are, again, this is another unique thing that you do. I'm not used to seeing road videos with voiceovers in them. That's got to be something that had never happened before. And I'm wondering where you got the idea for that.
I don't know, because nobody else does it. That was something that I came up with. Originally, we weren't doing voiceovers. We were talking live over the videos. And after we did 2 or 3 of those, I went back and watched them. I was like, oh, we sound really stupid. Because, it's not like you got a screen in front of you giving you information. You're doing everything off the top of your head from memory or whatever. And I was like, well, that's wrong. After I look it up, something I said is wrong. Well, I can't go back in and correct it.
Yeah.
Once it's done, if we're going to go with a live soundtrack. So after our 3rd or 4th video, that's when I started doing just adding music and doing the voiceover. But I wanted to talk about what we were seeing, because, like I said, originally it was just streets in New Orleans, so there was stuff to talk about. It's not like it was just interstate. Now, sometimes I struggle to find stuff to talk about. So I'm talking about the towns that are on the exit signs or whatever. Sometimes I don't talk at all. I just introduce the video at the beginning and do my closeout at the end, and that's all I do. But for the local videos, there was stuff to talk about, so I talked about it.
Yeah. I think it gives the video a much more intimate feel. It almost feels like we're watching the video with you, and you're kind of talking us through things.
And that's kind of the way it was intended to be.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting touch. And as you said, nobody else has done that, or nobody ever thought to do it before you did. But no, you've really made you've really made it work, and it's definitely one of the things that makes your work memorable. I know that everybody kind of tries to find their own little place, because there are a lot of YouTubers who do road videos now, but everybody's kind of trying to find their own little specific area where they can kind of stand out. And I think what you do with the narration is definitely one of those things that helps you stand out, and it's one of the things that I, and I'm sure all your other subscribers, really appreciate. But I want to take a second just to say that I am very proud. One of the coolest things I've done since I became a mainstay in the hobby is getting to narrate videos for your channel. I think that was So cool to be able to do that. And I am very proud to be on the podium of 504 Road Trips narrators. You know that whole like podium where the Formula One racers and you finish first, second, and third. I'm on the podium.
Yeah.
I might have only done 2 videos, but that's 2 more than about 6.5 billion other people.
Right.
So that's something that I find really cool, and it was a pleasure to do that for your channel. And
you are one of 3, because me and Carrie are 1 and 2,
I was going to say, there's you, there's me, and then there's also a female voice that we hear every once in a while.
That's Carrie, and she hasn't been doing any lately. When I get back into the Minneapolis videos, I think I'm going to have her voice those over, since that's her area of expertise, because she lived in North Dakota and Minneapolis. So,
I'd rather listen to her anyway.
Well,
I got tired of listening to you after a while.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. I've noticed that I can tell just by looking at the analytics which one of us voiced the video over.
Really?
Yeah. It seems to the videos that she voices over actually get longer watch time. Each person that watches a little bit more of the video. The demographics change a little bit, like the ages and the male and of course there's never a lot of female viewers, because I just think there's not as many female road geeks.
I think that's to be expected. Yeah.
But in the last few months, I've noticed that female viewership is up to like 25%, whereas before it was like 5%.
Oh, really?
So yeah, and there's a lot of I noticed a lot of over 65 people have been watching. I don't go into that part of the analytics that often, but it does. Sometimes I'll sit there and just look at that stuff for hours, just trying to figure out exactly who's watching the videos.
Yeah.
But
well, tell Carrie I said hello, and tell her that she needs to quit being a slacker and narrate more videos.
Yeah, that's. I've been cranking them out so fast that I just, I've just been narrating all of them lately, but
and she's gonna give me a hard time when she watches this video.
She may be watching right now. She's not showing up in the chat.
No, I haven't seen her.
Oh, okay. Maybe she's not. Maybe she's watching on the TV.
She's lurking somewhere.
Yeah.
But how did the two of you meet?
She was living in Baton Rouge, going to school at LSU, and we met on Twitter. She was just somebody I followed on Twitter, and we got into a couple of conversations, and she posted on Twitter that she was selling her iPod, and she had an iPod Touch. And I was on a health kick at the time and had been riding my bike a lot, and my iPhone 3 that I had at the time only held like 4 songs, so I wanted an iPod to listen, so I could listen to music while I was riding the bike. So I offered to buy it from her. So we met for coffee and we met halfway. We met in Laplace and sat down and started talking, and we wound up staying until the place closed.
Wow.
And we saw each other again within a week, I guess. We met up and went and hung out at the mall, and then it became dates, and it just kind of took off from there.
Wow.
And wasn't looking to meet anybody on Twitter. I mean, I still to this day don't know how people. I understand people might meet on Facebook or and they have apps specifically for people to meet.
Yeah.
They got all those dating apps and stuff like that. She was just somebody that was on Twitter, and I happened to meet because I wanted to buy her iPod, and
Wow.
we hit it off, and now I hardly ever go on Twitter.
So now your dating app was Twitter.
Yeah.
Wow, yep. That's amazing. That's definitely a unique story.
Oh yeah.
I don't know anybody else who's had an experience like that.
No, and no, I don't know anybody else that's ever met specifically from Twitter.
But she's really taken to the whole YouTube idea with you.
Well, she was also a road geek, not to the same extent that I am, because I was more into maps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she spent a lot of time in North Dakota, so you have to drive to go anywhere. You're driving a long distance. She had a driver's license at 14. Because they have provisions for that. If you're on a farm or whatever, you can get a driver's license a year earlier than everybody else. But so she did a lot of driving, and she moved to Minneapolis right out of high school. So she was back and forth between Dickinson, North Dakota, and Minneapolis,
That's a
which
long
is
drive.
that is a very long drive. I didn't realize just how long it was. I mean, that's western North Dakota to eastern Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's God. It must take 10 hours. And I drove it. I can't even tell you how long it took. I know it took forever.
Yeah.
And so she has the whole, get out on the road and drive thing, just like I do.
Yeah.
So that, was one of our. That was one of the things that we had in common, was the desire to get out on the road and travel, not jump on a plane and travel, get in the car and travel.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that we have a couple of notable road geek couples in the community. There's you two, and then there's of course Laura and Mike over at mdroads.com. But it's always interesting to meet a road geek couple. That was probably the thing that I thought was the most interesting about meeting you guys for the first time, is that, wow, this is actually a couple and they both actually share the same interest of roads. Like that's pretty unusual. But you two have really made it work on YouTube, and it's really cool to see that. It's really cool to see the dynamic between the two of you.
we don't. Well, it's not often that we're both on at the same time. As far as interacting with each other, of course, we had the interview with you in 2017 where we were both, you interviewed both of us together. That's one of the few times that, we've been in a video where we're interacting with each other. Although sometimes, when I'm doing voiceovers, she'll interject, and I don't know whether people hear this or not, because it's usually off to the side, because, she'll correct me from across the room or whatever, or she'll, just make some kind of a comment, and you can hear it in the video if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to have her narrate some of the videos, especially when it's something that she's more familiar with. That's why she did the videos up north.
Yeah. Let's get to a couple of questions in the live chat. Priorities for the.
Forgot about that.
What?
I completely forgot there was live chat.
Yeah, there's actually people watching this. Can you believe it?
Yeah, no kidding.
Killer's Opinion wants to know the top 3 highways on your priorities list that you want to clinch next in Louisiana.
In Louisiana, specific to Louisiana, well, in the plans, this is one of the plans that are coming up for the near future, just because we can't travel too far, is I want to cover all of the interstates and U.S. highways in Louisiana. We have not really covered any of I-20, so that's a priority.
Yeah.
But I-20 is far away, so we got to cover something that's going to get us from here to there. So there's several 3-digit U.S. highways that run north-south. And I'm going to say 165, 167, and 171.
Yeah.
And there's a fourth one that's a really oddball number, and I think it's an odd number even though it runs east-west, and it's somewhere up around Natchez, Mississippi, and it crosses into Louisiana. Those are going to be our priorities as far as getting the most major highways in Louisiana complete.
Yeah.
Now that's within Louisiana. If we want to go outside of Louisiana, I want to get more of I-10, probably going east for right now, since you've recently covered more of the west end of it.
Yeah, I spent some quality time on I-10 in the mountain time zone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which, that's so far from here, that's something we need along, to even get anywhere close to that, we would need a lengthy holiday to be able to get out there.
Yeah.
Whereas I could drive to Jacksonville, Florida in a day.
Yeah, it's
so
not,
I could,
right, it's not that far. Yeah.
No. I mean, I could complete I-10 to the east of us. I think we're current up to Mobile. We're current up to I-65. So I could complete I-10 to the east of us and get that done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm really, like I said earlier, I'm really interested in I-65 north of Birmingham.
See if you can finish clinching it. I mean, heck, if you
well,
can,
yeah, that if we get to Indianapolis,
it's only,
I think I would just keep going.
I think from Indianapolis up to Gary, it's only another 120 miles, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't, I mean, hell, go for broke,
Yeah.
Have dinner in Chicago.
Yep.
And then,
now, I'd like to do I-55.
And then you could come back on 55 or 57, do
right.
something like that. 57 would be an easy one to clinch, yeah.
From what I've seen of 55 north of Memphis, it is boring as hell. I mean, there's nothing, when you get up until you get into Missouri, there's nothing. And I'm not sure what happens once you get into Missouri, because I've only been about 10 miles into Missouri on I-55, but I don't think there's much of anything in Missouri until you get well up into Missouri.
Yeah, there's a reason why I haven't uploaded those videos.
Oh, really?
Because there ain't that much to see. Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I mean, I gave the viewers 555 in Arkansas.
That was something I wanted to do. I didn't realize you did that. I never saw that series.
When the hell was that? Well, I filmed it over Memorial Day weekend last year, and I think it was one of those things where I just kind of threw it out there just as kind of like a video dump, because I wanted to at least put something out there from Arkansas. But I think I uploaded 555. I'm pretty sure I did.
I'm going to have to go back and look for that, because I was kind of curious about that. We drove part of it, like a mile of it.
Yeah.
When we were doing US 49.
Yeah, because I did 555, and then in Missouri there's 155, which crosses the Mississippi over into Tennessee, and so I covered that one. And 55 in Missouri, my God, like until you're within like 20 miles of St. Louis, there ain't a whole lot to see.
Right.
But then St. Louis itself is pretty cool.
I think that would be interesting, because I've never been to St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis is a neat town. It was a shame that I visited it when the river was at major flood stage.
Right.
And it was like 30 feet above flood stage or whatever. So like none of the riverfront attractions were open. They were all flooded out. But I was able to, check out the downtown. I went to a Cardinals game. I went to the Gateway Arch. So there's stuff to do there that, and there's even more to do when the river is not, raging past. But
right. Which it probably is right now.
Yeah.
Because the river's been high down here for the last couple of months. I think it's finally started to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was like a top 10 flood stage for St. Louis last year, like all time. So
yeah, we had one of our worst last year as well.
Yeah. But, if you ever get to, finish I-55, that's definitely one that would not only, accomplish a clinch, but it will also tie into, the Gulf Coast, because that's, of course, where 55 starts.
Right.
So that's an interstate that you already have at least a little bit of familiarity with.
Yeah.
And you've
actually, I'm more interested in doing US 61 than 55. Yeah. Okay. We've got that up to Vicksburg, and that's where we stopped on that. Yeah. Or do we have that to Memphis? No, we did that to Vicksburg. We never got beyond Vicksburg on video.
So, your channel is in its 5th year, as we said, and you've got, as we've said, a very impressive portfolio. Where do you want the channel to be 5 years from now? Like, put your time capsule hat on. Where are we 5 years from now? What are we talking about?
Well, let's see. 5 years from now, well, hopefully I'll have all of the interstates and U.S. highways in Louisiana done. Uh, and I hope to have more states. Okay, I'd really like to have video in at least the 48, what's the word I'm looking for? Continental United States.
Yeah.
I'd at least like to have that.
That'd be a neat goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be that difficult to do if I had time. You know what I mean? 5 years from now, I might be ready to retire, and maybe I'll have more time to do that kind of thing. I don't know.
Maybe we'll see you up in my area doing videos. That would be interesting.
Well, that's something that I'm definitely interested in doing videos in New York. My thing was always to be able to drive the avenues of Manhattan. Now, you covered that pretty well, and you covered it at the most ideal time recently with the COVID, videos because there's nobody there.
Yes, it did.
Otherwise, I would probably find driving in Manhattan too stressful. That's one place that I have no desire to operate a vehicle is in Manhattan.
Yeah, those videos will be out starting at the end of this month, and it's very eye-opening how easy it can be to traverse all the avenues in Manhattan when there's nobody around.
Yeah.
So it'll, I'm sure, remind you of,
that's
downtown New Orleans, the stuff that you were filming. Did we just lose him? Did I just lose you?
No, I'm here.
You're here? Okay, I thought I
Can you hear
lost
me?
you for a second.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I lost you for a second.
Yeah, no, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, but I was just saying, it's. I'm sure, like when you see the videos of Manhattan, it'll remind you of what you were seeing in, the CBD of New Orleans and Bourbon Street and all that. It's the same idea. It's no people around. Is there a scenario in your mind? And I know that we've been talking about, what you would like to have happen in the next few years, but do you think there's a scenario where you might just turn around and say, you know what, I'm out of here. I've done everything I wanted to do. I don't need to keep doing YouTube videos. I'm content with everything I've done, and you know what, I'm gonna stop and do something else with my life. Do you think there's something in you that would trigger that?
No, probably not. No, at least not as of right now. It's not something I spend that much time on. And the thing is, I don't think I'll ever stop traveling. So there's always going to be the opportunity to get more video. The only time-consuming part of it is the editing of the video, because I put in the highway shields and do the voiceovers and stuff like that. But it's not like it takes up that much of my time. If I wanted to have another hobby, I probably could have another hobby without without cutting into the time that I spend on YouTube. So I just don't see getting tired of it and walking away from it. I don't see that really happening. I mean, I don't have my 1 million subscribers yet. I want that gold play button award to hang on the wall behind me up here. In the downtown area somewhere. I'll hang it on the side of this building right here.
That make that building look nice.
Yeah.
At least something will be occupying it.
I did get a play button from 601 Travels. He made me a play button. I think you got one too, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So I do have a YouTube play button. It just didn't come from YouTube.
Yeah, I find it interesting that everyone that I've interviewed to this point has all basically said the same thing. They basically have recited the same answer you just gave me about, there's no conceivable scenario where you would stop being a YouTuber, being a, productive member of the road fan community or whatever you want to call it. You all are very steadfast in your commitment to the hobby.
Um, yeah, because I mean, it's just it's what we do. It's not. It's not. The only thing that could possibly change it was if there was something that prevented me from being able to travel. You know, I'm not going to become a vlogger. I'm not going to become, an Adam the Woo or anything like that and do something different. This is what I do on YouTube. This is the only thing I'm going to do on YouTube.
Yeah.
So no, I just don't see where.
It's too much of who you are at this point.
Right. Exactly.
And you have, in the course of a few years, you've gone from somebody who used to look up to a lot of YouTubers to now being in a position where you have a lot of people looking up to you. And that transformation happened in relatively short amount of time. It happened in a much shorter amount of time than it happened for me.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I didn't know people were looking up to me.
No, but I do think that people look at what you do and they take inspiration from it.
Well, that's possible. I mean, I know of a couple of people, who we have 601 Travels, who makes his own videos, and he has been for a couple of years now. Richard Felstead, this guy from Australia.
Yeah.
He started following us back early on, and he started putting up his own road videos. He drives around, and shoots video, and he's been doing something different lately because of the, because they have the same lockdown that we do. But there's a few people like that I think have. I never really thought about people looking up to me as far as.
But
I still feel like the new kid on the block. I mean, I don't. I don't feel like a YouTube veteran or anything like that.
Yeah, you kind of. It's interesting because again, like you came on the scene and very quickly you developed a following. And very quickly, people started to take notice of that. And then from that, you had the 601s of the world and the Richard Felsteds of the world. And whatever you want to call it, it's rooted in the same thing. Like, people were inspired by what you did. And I just wonder what that feels like, what that means to you.
Well, I don't know because I've never really thought about it. I've never really thought about that anybody was... I don't know. I'm actually kind of shocked now that you're saying that. I know it's something I never thought about. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question because it's something that just never occurred to me.
I think we all get really entrenched with what we're doing, and we're all guilty of kind of not, keeping tabs on what's going on around us and maybe not necessarily being in tune with the impact that we're having.
Yeah, that could be.
I know that that's true for me, and I'm guilty of that as well.
I mean, do you consider yourself to be YouTube famous?
No.
I mean, and you've got more than twice as many people watching your videos than mine. So, like I said, it's just something that I've never really thought about that much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I certainly am in the camp with you that it doesn't really occur to me, but when I stop and think about it, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, and we've both had our share of impact on the hobby, and long may it continue for you on 504 Road Trips. That is Jason's YouTube channel. And I am sure that, and I know already, that you have gained a few new subscribers this evening from...
yeah, I'm sure I have. I haven't looked, but...
but if you see a little bump, that's why, because you can't...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I can't believe we got 20 people watching.
You had the nerve to come on my YouTube channel again, and it was great to have you. And I'm looking forward to making another appearance and gracing you with my presence over on your side of things at some point. But
well, you got to let me know the next time you're coming into town, because we gotta drive across Texas, and I think we're gonna have to do that one together. Because I sure as hell ain't doing that by myself, and I don't know if Carrie will put up with me all the way across Texas.
yeah.
So yeah,
No.
if you want to get all of Texas on YouTube, you may have to come down and split some of the driving with me or something.
Well, I think we could probably work that out.
Yeah.
Because, we'd have to do something to keep ourselves occupied for 700 miles, or however far it is from Houston to El Paso.
It's more than that.
Yeah, I think the last exit I filmed on 10 was exit 737, just outside of Houston.
Yeah, I think it goes into the 800s, pretty well into the 800s.
Yeah, I think the last exit is 880 something.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you saw the sign that I posted in El Paso with Beaumont 880 miles or whatever. I was like, wow, 880 and you're still in the same state.
Yeah.
But yeah. But anyway, Jason, it's been a great pleasure to have you back. Had a lot of fun talking with you about all things business related, YouTube related, and God knows I'm sure there's other stuff that we could have gotten to that we just didn't have time for tonight. But you're welcome here anytime, and I hope you'll come back at some point. And I'm sure you'll surprise us with another background picture, because that one's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I got to come up with something different. I notice it's kind of glitching a little bit, but that's Skype, I guess. Yeah. I need to get a real green screen behind me. This is Skype just does this. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I got to figure out how that works. For
it does. There's no uniform color behind me. There's just a window and a couch. Closed blinds. It's not green screen. I'm going to set up a real green screen, and then I'll be able to put up a good background, and I won't have I'm sure I have a halo, and I notice my arms disappear every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You've got a much more professional background than any of us has had to date, so you're way ahead of the curve, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But Jason from 504 Road Trips on YouTube. He's also on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm sure you're in some other places as well.
I'm on everything.
Yeah, he's all over the place. Search for him in any kind of social media, and you'll probably run into him, whether you want to or not. But that will wrap up tonight's presentation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for hanging out with me and Jason for a couple hours talking about all things Gulf Coast YouTube related. We will be back tomorrow with the start of another week of exciting live drive afternoon coverage as we get very close to Memorial Day. And I'm sure you guys will be watching that as well. So thank you for joining us here in the friendly confines of New York. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Dan.